Alright, welcome back to the Supercoach Nuff channel. In this video we're going to go through a bit of a beginner's guide on how to play Fantasy Premier League. So most viewers in this channel are probably more NRL focused, whether that's Supercoach or Fantasy. But I guess, getting to the end of the season, we're fast running out of trades, looking for something to do to keep ourselves occupied over the summer. Obviously, there is things like the Big Bash, Supercoach, NBL started last year and definitely enjoyed that. We'll be doing that stuff again this season on the channel. But I guess, probably one of the biggest fantasy games in the world is Fantasy Premier League. So there was about 11 million players last year. So, it's pretty worldwide. I think the last few years the champions have come from places like Azerbaijan, Norway, all over the place, South Africa maybe, so it's truly a global fantasy sports game. So if you love fantasy sports, it's an easy one to get into as well. As you'll see, there is some sort of special tweaks and differences that make it different to Supercoach and Fantasy and those sort of games that we play in Australia. But if you enjoy soccer and Premier League is probably the biggest league in the world, it's definitely one to have a crack at. So in terms of the how-tos, the help section is really good. I was trying to find some stuff around the scoring and that to put together something, and when I saw this information, I just thought, well, I'm just going to use this. Let's keep it simple. So I guess at its most basic, in terms of picking your team. It's like Supercoach, Fantasy, any of those type of games where you pick a squad of players. So in Fantasy FPL, you only pick 15 players, and they do have 4 different positions. So you pick 2 goalkeepers, 5 defenders, 5 midfielders, and 3 forwards. The total of those 15 players can't exceed the budget of 100 million. So some players get paid 100 million to go to the club or whatever, but for Fantasy, they're all ranked based on a $100 million budget. And I guess the one thing that is slightly different from Fantasy, Supercoach, that sort of thing, for Rugby League, is that you can only pick up to 3 players from a single club. So you can't just fill up on Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, those top teams. You do have to be a bit strategic about the players that you pick, because you can only pick 3 from any given club. So, that's the first thing you do. And I have a video from a couple of days ago now where I went through and I picked my initial squad of 15. So if you want to have a look at that, you're more than welcome to go and check that out after this video. But I guess there will be updated videos throughout the FPL preseason where we look at some different options and looking at the experts. So again, a bit like my AFL Supercoach, it's more I look at what everyone else is doing and then try to work it based off that. I guess once you've picked your squad of 15 and you're in budget and you've got the number of players per team correct, the next thing you do is choose your starting 11. So every week you only play 11 of your 15, similar to in NRL Supercoach. You pick 17 out of your squad of 25, 21 obviously in NRL Fantasy. But yeah, we pick 11 players. You can play in a number of different formations. It's not like Supercoach where you have to pick 1 hooker, 2 front rowers, 3 second rowers, and so on. You can be fluid, much like in the actual football or soccer. There's different formations, but the rules are you have to have 1 goalkeeper. Obviously, you can't play without a goalkeeper. You have to have at least 3 defenders and at least 1 forward. So you can't play like a 4-6-0 formation like the classic Barcelona team with the false 9, mostly because you've only got 5 midfielders to start with. So you got to play at least 3 defenders as well. So that stops people just playing 3 forwards, 5 midfielders, and 2 defenders, just to give it a bit more of a realistic look to the team. because I don't think there's ever been a two-man defensive team in the game of actual football. You also pick a captain and vice captain, similar to Supercoach. Your captain scores doubled. If your captain's out, then your vice captain becomes the captain. Because the game locks out at the start of the game week, it doesn't have a rolling lockout. Things like the captaincy loophole and stuff aren't a thing in FPL. So you don't need to worry about that. You just lock in who you think is going to be captain. Next best option is vice captain, and you go from there. So I guess also in terms of your bench, so if players miss out, obviously those players on your bench are automatically covered. So like the auto emergency in Supercoach or Fantasy. And a bit like NRL Fantasy, it works off the prioritization. So, the first player on your bench is the first one to sub on for any unavailable player, then the second one and the third one. And a bit like Fantasy, it does rely on position as well. So if you're playing with 3 defenders and a defender is out, it'll be your next defender. Even if your first player is a midfielder or a forward, it'll go to the first defender because you have to play at least 3 defenders in your team. But obviously, you'll work that out as you play and players miss out for injuries, that sort of thing. As I said, it locks out at the start of the game week. And in the Premier League itself, they don't actually name their teams until an hour before kickoff. So other than the very first game of the round, you don't actually know who's going to play in any given round. You just have to use an educated guess. So it does make it a bit trickier, particularly when we're here in Australia and some of the games kick off at 3 o'clock in the morning, Australian time. I don't stay up and watch it that much. Just go with, the good players are going to get picked every week. I guess one little tip for those that are brand new to it is Man City is a great football team. However, their players do get rotated quite frequently, because they're all so good. So, as great as it is to lock in, 3 big hitters from Man City, there's a couple of them that could just get rotated and play every second game just to keep them fresh and on top. So just keep that in mind as you're picking your team. So the next thing is transfers. So transfers is, I guess, what they call trades in FPL. And every week you get 1 free transfer. So essentially there's unlimited transfers for the season. It's not like Supercoach and Fantasy where you have a set number of trades. You can trade in a whole new team every week if you like. However, you'll see they say you get 1 free transfer every week. Any other trade that you make after that free one is going to cost you 4 points. And we'll talk about the scoring in a bit. But 4 points is, fairly significant in terms of the amount of points it costs to transfer in a player. So it's always a calculated risk. Obviously, if you've got 3 long-term injuries in your team, it might be worthwhile sort of taking the 4-point hit to try and get some more points going. But as much as possible, you want to try to, just use the free transfers. So if you don't use a free transfer, you do get to hold it till the next week. So if you don't trade in after the first week, you get 2 trades for after the second week, or 2 transfers, I should say, after the second week. In the past, you've only been able to bank up to 2 transfers. So generally, after 2 weeks, everyone would start to make at least 1 free transfer, so that you're not losing free transfers. However, this year they've changed it so the maximum number of free transfers is 5. So if you can hold your team for the first 4 game weeks, you could potentially have 5 free transfers in week 5. So definitely adds a different sort of tactic to the game. Like I said, you don't have to trade as early. But I guess when we talk about the player prices, there is definitely a benefit to trading a bit earlier. At other times, you're limited to 20 transfers. Okay, so I think if you try to, take all the 4-point hits, you can only go up to 20. That's a rule I didn't even know about till I've looked at this properly. So I don't think that it really applies if you're playing the game seriously. It doesn't apply though when you're playing a wild card or a free hit. We'll talk about those chips in a little bit. Player prices. So obviously, part of the transfer, similar to in Supercoach and Fantasy, is you want to try to trade in players when they're low in value, and then trade them out when they're higher in value. Um, I guess one of the things with player prices is it changes on a 24-hour basis. And I guess, unlike in Supercoach and Fantasy where there's like a break even where you can calculate their projected price movement, the price changes are based on popularity. So trade ins and trade outs. If a player's becoming more popular, they'll raise the price. Sort of makes it a bit tricky again. Sometimes you've got to trade really early in the hope that you don't miss the price rise, and then you can't afford the player because you're 1.1 million short. And the other thing as well is when you're selling players, so if you've traded in someone at 5 million and then you want to sell them for 6 million, you don't get the full 6 million in your budget. You only get 50% of it. So if you trade someone out for 6 million, you only get 5.5 million in the bank. So it does make you sort of think about not constantly trading players in and out, because if you trade a player out and you want to get them back in, you've essentially got to pay that extra 50% on top of what you made in the initial profit. So it sort of encourages you to actually, pick players for the longer term, which I sort of like, in Supercoach and Fantasy in recent years with the extra trades and that sort of thing. There's definitely been, and the trade boosts as well, there's definitely been a shift towards trading early and often to try and maximize value. It's a little bit trickier to do that in FPL. But like I said, it just makes it a different tactic and something to consider. So when we talk about wildcards and free hits, they're what we refer to as chips. So I guess like a poker chip, it's something that you can play throughout the season, and they provide different boosts or opportunities for your team. So you can only play one chip in a single game week, so you can't stack them on top of each other. Otherwise, there'd be some ridiculous scores. But the chips we've got a bench boost. So essentially, that means that all the players on your bench also play in the same week as your starting 11. So you get the score of 15 players as opposed to just 11. A free hit where you can make unlimited transfers within a single game week. But then for the next week, your team returns to whatever it was before. So things like the bench boost and free hit are really popular towards the back end of the season. When you get double game weeks, which is essentially when fixtures are postponed due to like the European Cups or FA Cup fixtures. They might sort of stop games from one week and move them to later in the season. And so then what happens then is they get played in that particular game week. It means that you score from the players result in both games. So if you've got a lot of players that are playing in that double game week, you could use like the bench boost. If you want to target a heap of those players just for that 1 week, you can use the free hit. It's not to say you can't use them earlier in the season, but I guess, the top players try to leave it late. And once they sort of announce when fixtures are that have been postponed, when they're made available, then you can start to look at, well, is it worthwhile using those chips at that time? You've got the triple captain chip, so that's just in 1 week. Whoever you nominate as captain gets triple points instead of double. And it's one of those ones you pick the obvious choice where it's like, oh, this guy's got a good matchup and he's in form, and you pick him and then he doesn't score a goal or whatever, and you don't end up getting the value out of it. Or someone will just play it on a random player on a given week and they'll score a hat trick and get a massive boost that way. So it's one of the hardest ones to predict in terms of output. I think a couple of years ago I slapped it on like a Haaland and he scored a hat trick or something that week. It worked out really well, but a lot of people did the same thing. Last year I put it on, I think, Solanke against Sheffield. I thought, oh, for sure he'll go off. He was scoring goals for fun and Sheffield were letting him in. and he didn't score a goal. So it's a tricky one, but you can play that one essentially whenever you just feel like, oh yeah, this is a big week for this player. Boom, triple captain. Wild card. So this is, I guess, one of the ones I'd love to see in Supercoach just because I think it would be really interesting. But it's where you get to make as many transfers as you want in a given week. And I guess unlike the other transfers we've talked about, you don't get charged for points. So this is where you can, if you want to change 10 players in your team, or, can entirely change the structure of your team. So let's say, like the team I picked, you've gone with Haaland and Salah, the two expensive guys. Right, you're like, I want to cash them out and spend the money to, get like Palmer and Foden and Ollie Watkins. You can make those trades without sort of costing you 4 points for each one. So you do get 2 wild cards. You get one in the first half of the season, one in the second half of the season. So generally, there's 2 different ways people will use the first wild card. Some players will pick a team for the first couple of weeks and use the wild card early to jump on all of those guys that look value. Other players will try to sort of leave it for 8, 9, 10 weeks, and they'll target when certain teams look like they're starting to get a better or worse draw, and then use it to flip their team then. So there's a couple of different strategies for that first wild card. And then generally the second wild card will get lumped in with the bench boost and free hit and used to target those double game weeks towards the back end of the season. Last year I went early on the wild card, the second wild card, because I was hating my team mid-season, and I think it worked out pretty well because, as I said, I finished quite well. But definitely those players that held it back, it did help them get those extra points at the back end of the season. So well worth keeping in mind. There's a couple of strategies there. And then there's the mystery chip. This is a new one this year. No one knows what it is. It's not available till next year anyway, 2025. There's been some speculation, but, not worth worrying about because no one knows what it is. So yes, you can add these things to, any given game week. As I said, probably the meta is to try and hang on to them as long as you can before using them. Aside from the triple captain, I think it's just really just a throw at the stumps. Deadlines, as we said, it's basically before the start of each game is when the game locks out. So it's good in the sense you don't have to sort of be following it all weekend. Like in Supercoach and stuff, you got to sort of watch out on Sunday. Oh, is there any late changes based on the team that was named on Tuesday? That sort of thing. Whereas in Premier League, as soon as the first game kicks off, or even before then, so you can only rely on things like the news that's coming out from teams and obviously, following that a bit. But once the weekend starts, you don't stress. You start planning for next week, if anything. So deadlines is pretty cool. In terms of scoring, so I guess, how it actually works for your players. So as long as your player plays, they get a point. If they play for more than 60 minutes, so obviously that's, they don't get substituted off before 60 minutes, they get an extra point. So 2 points for playing the full 90 minutes or at least 60. After that, it works on goals and assists. So goals, and it depends on position because obviously a goalkeeper scoring a goal is pretty rare, so that's worth 10 points. Defender is worth 6, midfielder 5, forward worth 4. So, it sort of stands to reason that forwards going to be worth less points because they score more goals generally. In saying that, there is a lot of sort of very forward or advanced players that are picked in the midfield, worth 5 points, and so that's why you'll see a lot of the midfielders are quite expensive, is because they do sort of find their way into the goals. For an assist, you get 3 points. So, that's across the board. So if it's a forward, midfielder, defender, they get 3 points for an assist. A goalkeeper and a defender gets 4 points for a clean sheet. So that's where the team doesn't concede a goal in the game. And 1 point for a clean sheet for a midfielder because they do a little bit of defensive work, but obviously it gives an opportunity for defenders and goalkeepers to score. because obviously they don't score a lot of goals. Also for goalkeepers, they get a point for every 3 shots that they save. So that's an extra way again, because goalkeepers don't do too much in terms of attack. They do get 5 points for a penalty save though, which is a nice little bonus. It's hard to predict penalty saves though, so you don't pick a player just because they're good at saving penalties, because you'd never know when a penalty is going to come. You'd never know if they're going to be able to save it. And then for the on-field players, for each penalty miss, you get -2. So, if you can't score a goal when you're only 12 metres away and you've only got the goalkeeper to beat, probably deserve to get a few points knocked off. Bonus points. So there's a bonus point system, which is based on a lot of the other stats in the game, like passes, tackles, that sort of thing. The goals and assists are included in that too. So it's like a man of the match sort of system, but it's based numerically on statistics. So there's information about that if you want to delve into that. But just know if the player's contributing to a lot of the good stuff on the field, they're a good chance of getting some bonus points. For every 2 goals conceded by a goalkeeper or a defender, you lose a point. So if you get a clean sheet, that's 4 points on. If the team concedes 1 goal, it's just 0. If it's 2 goals or 3 goals, then it's -1. If it's 4 goals, it's -2, and so on. For each yellow card, you lose a point. So, if a player starts, gets a yellow card and then gets subbed off before at half time or something, they can actually get 0 points for the game. You get -3 for a red card and -2 for an own goal. So I know last year or a few years ago now, there was a player who got 2 own goals and then got sent off with a red card. So I think he ended up with -6 or -7. And then there was someone who actually triple captained him, so they ended up with -21 points. It was one of the craziest FPL things I've ever seen. So there's a breakdown of the points. So essentially, you're looking for players who can score goals is the big one. Also, assist goals is good because 3 points. So this is why we target those more attacking players, forwards, midfielders in particular. But with defenders and goalkeepers, you want them from teams where they're going to, be solid defensively and keep clean sheets. Goalkeepers, you might want some goalkeepers that are good at saving as well, because you do get points for saves. And I guess, you don't want players who are always getting cards for dirty play. Just on the clean sheets there, it's you can see if they play at least 60 minutes and get substituted off, they can still get a clean sheet. So if you have a defender who plays for 70 minutes, gets substituted off, and it's currently 2-0, so they haven't conceded a goal, and then the team concedes a goal while they're off, they still get the clean sheet point. So that is pretty handy. The players aren't penalised if they're not on the field when a goal is scored. But that only occurs for at least 60 minutes. So if a player comes on in the last 5 minutes and they don't concede a goal, they don't get the clean sheet points. So some more specifics about assists and that, because sometimes it's a bit contentious about, who gets the assist, or sometimes the goal won't get an assist because they believe it was all the individual player. So that's their sort of justification around that. Bonus points, I won't go through all those. If you really want to, delve into that and try to work out the stats, you can. But you don't get these points. You only get 3, 2, or 1 for the bonus player. And I guess the way to look at it is if you've got a player that's scored 2 goals and assisted 1, chances are they're going to get the 3 bonus points as well. So, that's just the way to look at it. Leagues and cups. So this is just the general rules around that. But with our private league, which I will go back to and flash the code on, leagues and cups, we are playing a head-to-head league this year. So last year I think I just had it as a classic, which is based on overall, which, I guess if you're starting to struggle, makes it a bit tough. But with the head-to-head league, obviously, if you you're struggling overall, it doesn't matter because you can do a wild card, change your team, and then all of a sudden you're beating everyone in the head-to-head. So the league code there is E1BCPH. I will put the link in the description below this video as well for those that want to join in. And I might even have a look at if anyone has joined in yet. Doesn't look like it, but standings. No one yet. That's fine. Got to keep pumping it up to try and get people involved. But if it doesn't work out, well, then I'll just play overall and you can watch and follow along. Doesn't really worry me either way. So yeah, so I guess that's the basics of FPL. As I said, it's pretty simple in the sense of you pick and select a squad. Once the game week starts, you can't change it because it's locked out, so you don't need to stress about that. And things like unlimited transfers, wild cards, definitely means that even if you're not doing too well, you can mix it up and get back into it. So yeah, I think it's a fun game. I said it particularly if you are a fan of the soccer, much like the reason why we play Supercoach and fantasy for NRL, AFL is we enjoy watching the games and just adds that extra little bit of interest in it. But I'll just put the team back up on the screen. I haven't actually picked the team yet, so I'll go to the transfers. So if you wanted to have a look at how I've come to this team, have a look at the previous video where I did my initial team setup. Hoping to start doing a bit more in-depth analysis in the coming days, and might try to look at, well, what if we go big in the midfield sort of deal. But yeah, if you've got any questions, comments, thoughts about any of this, feel free to get them below this video. Give us a thumbs up if you're enjoying the FPL content. Subscribe for all the fantasy stuff we've got on the channel. And other than that, we'll catch you in the next one.